Meet the Ashby Hawkins family. For one summer, they're giving up the trappings of their modern lives and travelling back in time to live through 50 years of British weekends. Steph, Rob, Daisy and Seth will experience a radical transformation in how we spend our leisure time.
I'm free!
From the formal...
I feel like I'm going to a wedding.
...to the frivolous.
We're going on holiday.
From do-it-yourself to doing almost nothing.
You've turned into Wham!
Starting in 1950, their own home will be their time machine.
Ooh. It's 1961!
Fast-forwarding them through a new year each day.
What on earth are you doing?
We're making a massive dartboard.
It's beige!
Oh, there's a telly up in the corner as well, look.
As they discover how a social, technological
What's that?
and spending revolution
Oh my God!
has transformed our free time forever.
Are you ready?
Yeah!
This time, it's back to the thrift and formality of the 50s.
Is that the entertainment, Mum playing the piano in the evening? I get stressed when I can't do things perfectly. This quiet corner of suburban London is home to the Ashby Hawkins family. Mum Steph is an IT consultant.
How's your day?
Tough. And I've got a really heavy bag because I've got 2 laptops today.
She's the family's main breadwinner, while Dad Rob works from home as a childminder and does all the cooking and cleaning.
I make breakfast for my family in the mornings, then I make lunch for all the children in my care, and then I make dinner for all the children and all of my family in the evenings.
Have you got a nuclear bomb? I don't think we should be throwing it around.
16-year-old Daisy and 12-year-old Seth's spare time is dominated by technology.
I don't really remember life before internet because I'm only 12.
And even time spent together as a family is on individual screens. But for one summer, the Ashby Hawkins have agreed to leave their modern lives behind and embark on an extraordinary journey into the past.
It really feels like it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to do something together. Because when we don't have the devices getting in the way, we might actually have to talk and listen a bit more.
But it's not just the family who are time-travelling. Their modern home is being ripped apart and returned to how it would have looked in 1950. Their entertainment-filled lounge has been replaced by a sparse sitting room. The 21st century garden now has a functional shed and vegetable patch. And instead of open-plan living, there's a formal dining room and basic kitchen. Along with social historian Polly Russell, I'll be running this ambitious experiment to explore just how much our leisure time has been transformed in the last 50 years. We have so much choice today in how we spend our free time. Our houses are crammed with gadgets to divert and entertain us, and the sheer range of things to do outside the home would have baffled previous generations. So how do we think our family, the Ashby Hawkins, are going to respond to this sort of a room? Because they're a very modern family.
This is going to be, really strange for them to be in a space where there is no electronic gadgets, there's nothing for them to sort of play with. The kids are going to have to get used to being able to be still, to sit and read, play the piano.
When you say that they would be reading, they'd be playing the piano, I think, oh, that sounds quite nice for an evening, but every day, I mean, it's incredibly boring, probably, for a modern family.
There will not be the instant distractions that we're used to now.
In 1950, Britain was still recovering from the war. Taxes and prices were high, so people had little disposable income. And there wasn't much to buy anyway. Food was still rationed, and most of what we produced was exported.
Just at the moment, we're not earning nearly enough to pay for the food and materials which we've got to have to keep ourselves going. And in these circumstances, we just can't afford to spend on anything that isn't absolutely necessary.
As the government tried to boost Britain's shattered economy, they commissioned an extraordinary survey to find out exactly how much people were spending and what they were spending it on. Thousands of households kept detailed diaries of everything they bought and continued to do so until 1999. These expenditure surveys give the best possible insight into what families were doing in their leisure time. Over the next 6 weeks, everything the Ashby Hawkins do will be guided by these surveys. So what sort of clues does this give us about how people were spending their time in the 50s?
Well, what you see is that quite a lot of the goods that are being bought are goods which will require time to be used. So things for sewing, things for mending. This one, for instance, wood to repair the fender. So you see this make, do and mend practice coming out in these surveys.
Mending materials, second-hand shoes, a jigsaw puzzle, a small piece of lace.
What's really striking from our perspective is how little is being spent or how few goods are being spent compared to if you did a diary of this nature now.
It's time for the Ashby Hawkins to step back to 1950 and see their remodelled home for the first time.
I reckon it's going to be a pretty good history lesson for me.
The whole not being able to message my friends, I'm dreading that. Really, no Wi-Fi, really dreading that.
I'll be living like I suppose my granddad.
It's a trip into the unknown. Haven't got a clue what to expect. I'm really genuinely really excited.
Oh my god. This looks so great.
Wow.
Look at the photos.
Oh no. Look at Sally.
It feels like the house has gone back to where it kind of started.
I liked this room, actually, but it sort of feels like I'm in my grandma's house.
Is that a radio?
There's one of those modern clocks.
It's... Where's the TV going to go? Is that the entertainment, Mum playing the piano in the evening?
It feels like we'll be more upright. This is a sitting room, not a lounge.
That's so cool.
This is the entertainment.
Oh my god, Pink.
It feels really closed in and really tiny.
I love the fact you've got the best china on display.
What is that? I don't want to move
that. Bring it out. It's a carpet sweeper.
Yeah,
Yep.
Look at that.
You push it backwards and forwards instead of a Hoover.
There's not much in the way of technology in the house, but the garden shed is packed with all the tools no self-respecting 50s husband would be without.
That's brilliant, look. They've got massive tools in there, look. Look at those. Look at
the size of that wrench.
What are you use that for?
I love the little vegetable patch we have and the tools inside the shed. There's about 30 different spanners.
For me to have my own shed is quite cool. I'm looking forward to sawing stuff or wrenching stuff. That's be really good.
I've come to ensure the Ashby Hawkins understand just how much the strict conventions of the 1950s will control what they do with their time. Hello, Ashby Hawkins family.
Hello, Giles.
How do you like your 50s house?
I like it.
I love all the aspects of it.
I say your 1950s house. 68% of people didn't own their houses in the 1950s. That's the rent book. I would hand it to you, but you're a woman, so you wouldn't understand. I'll hand it to Rob, because Rob will be the breadwinner. So you're going to be at home all the time, running the kitchen. You'll be in there a little bit, helping your mother, training to become a full-time mother, because you're 16, aren't you?
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as a teenager. 12-year-olds, children have been invented, but there's nothing for you to do.
Invented, they're not really invented, they're more sort of...
Smart-ass remarks like that to your elders and betters in 1950 won't wash. Yes, a bit of that. You just have to run around outside and amuse yourself. But yes, you've got nothing to do in a modern sense. There's no TV in here. There's no computers. There's no phones. That's all. They've all been taken away from you, haven't you?
Yeah.
Like going to prison. I've got a guidebook for you, How to Live in the 1950s. It's quite thin. There's not a lot to do. You'll have to make your own fun. Good luck. Have a brilliant time in the 1950s.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
The Normally, the weekend is the time for the family to kick back and relax. But in the 1950s, Rob's got jobs to do.
I'm going to attach the terminal. There's nothing like that on the terminal. Start from the beginning showing, it's always handy, isn't it?
The expenditure survey is full of spending on tools and hardware, and Rob's following in the footsteps of a 50s husband from Hampstead who bought a bell, electrical wire and a bell push to build a new doorbell from scratch.
How's it going, son? The batteries are wired in series, i.e. the tail of the first is connected to the centre terminal of the second. What?
So basically, if you were to attach this part, you'd have to attach it to the opposite part.
So if I put negative, there's positive, put that onto negative. Is that what you're saying? Right, okay.
In this era before cheap mass production, ready-made items were a luxury. Men were encouraged to make everything themselves, from a clothes horse to a draining rack, even their own stepladder.
Ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. See, that's why I do the washing and ironing, cleaning, and cooking.
Not very good at DIY.
Yeah, not very good.
With no washing machine, dishwasher or hoover, for Steph the prospect of leisure is even more remote.
Oh my God, it's revolting. It really is horrible. This doesn't feel like it will be any different than it would have been 100 years, 200, 300 years before. But it seems like in the last 30 or 40 years we've come an awful long way with appliances and stuff. But this is just, this is no further on than washing stuff in a river and throwing it on the stones, isn't it, really?
A pile of washing, a couple of tubs, gallons of hot water, clouds of steam, bars of soap, and a whole heap of honest-to-goodness elbow grease.
In the early 50s, a washing machine cost around £30, just over a month's wages. They were so expensive that only 4% of households owned one. Domestic chores took up 11 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I'll be interested to see actually how dry the stuff comes out the other end. And the answer is actually not very much difference at all. It's still really wet. But I've just seen something. I think I'm doing it the wrong way round. Look at that. See, that's the way you mangle. Yes.
Let's try it down here, see that? Oh!
You do have to connect it. Fire up the button.
It's alive! Next week, making a car. Right.
Affordable power tools are nearly a decade away, so Rob's got to install the bell with a hand drill.
Please be there, please.
You can't just get an odd job man in to help. With virtually full employment, most men had full-time work, and tradesmen were hard to find and expensive. Doing it yourself became a necessity.
I think that's it. I think I'm in. I think I've done it. I think I've done it. I really, really hate DIY.
So much dust.
16-year-old Daisy normally spends her spare time on social media. But in 1950, she's a housewife in training and expected to help out.
This is really annoying me now. Mum, can you get one and help me? Please.
I had an inkling about what it was going to be like in terms of being a 50s housewife. I think it's just brought it crashing down as a reality of, wow, this actually is going to be quite hard work.
Nearly there. This is it. This is the moment. So, yeah. I'm all right. Rock and roll. Yeah.
After this, we can do the other carpet in the lounge. Oh, that'd be so much fun. Then we can wash Dad's clothes, then Seth's pants, and then we can do the socks afterwards.
After a long day on their feet, the family can finally sit down together.
This is really difficult.
It's because you're not, I hate to say it, baby, you're not doing it right.
I'd normally be on like my phone or watching TV. I haven't really made a lot of jigsaws since I really turned 10.
I think what you're trying to get across here is it's just so limited that the only thing that you have to entertain yourself is a piece of cardboard with a bit of a picture on it. I love a jigsaw.
Yeah, but Mum, you grew up on the jigsaws.
Yeah, we grew up
You didn't have an iPhone.
The lounge is so empty. There's like, it's not even a lounge. Like, it's not for lounging around and watching TV. Like, usually when I sit on the sofa, I'm looking at the TV, and now I am looking at the floor because there's nothing to look at. You know, it's a bit weird.
The tech I thought I'd miss would be my computer and tablet and all that sort of stuff, but actually the tech I've missed has been the white goods because everything's really labour intensive. My hands, state my hands after all that washing. It's like they're all dry and crusty, and I've got hangnails which are like really sore. I don't know how women cope with doing that every day. It's really, really grim.
It's a new day, which means a new year for the family.
Good morning, life. Good morning, sun. How are you? Skies above. Gee, it's great to be alive and in love.
Even though it's the weekend, there's no lie-in for Steph.
Sunday would normally be quite a relaxed day. Generally, Rob does a Sunday roast every Sunday, which is lovely. My sister comes over and we chat and we have a massive dinner, and I drink half a bottle of wine. I miss the wine.
London on a Sunday. Any other town in Britain might look much the same. Boring, do you think? Or just nice and quiet?
On a typical Sunday in the 1950s, there was almost nothing to do. It was illegal to trade and shops were shut. Commercial sporting events were banned, and cinemas and pubs had extremely limited opening hours. In fact, pretty much the only thing open was church. So that's where the family are heading.
Sunday mornings for us are the only morning of the entire week where we get to have a sleep. The appeal of just staying in bed on a Sunday morning just becomes too powerful, more powerful than God. Thinking, oh, duvet, oh God, and you're going to go duvet every time, aren't you? You're going to go duvet every time.
I kind of like Sunday best, but I do feel wildly... I feel like I'm going to a wedding. I feel like really...
Overdressed.
Really overdressed, and now ridiculous.
In 1950s Britain, most respectable families went to church. Contributions to collection plates appear regularly in the expenditure survey, like this family of 3 from Manchester, who gave sixpence to their church collection every week. Rob, Steph and Daisy will be attending the main service, while Seth and his friends Harvey and Tom are doing what the majority of children did on Sunday mornings.
Good morning, children.
Good morning.
Welcome to Sunday school. How are we today?
Today's lessons will be led by Anne Widdicombe, a former Sunday school teacher.
Right, well, I think you'll find that in church today they're learning all about the Good Samaritan, and that's what we're going to learn about this morning.
In 1951, over 50% of children went to Sunday school every week, compared to just 5% now. Seth and his friends have never been before.
I want you to think of situations today where you can help somebody and be a good Samaritan. And I want you to write me a little description of that. It wasn't a big chore to go to Sunday school. I used to walk 2 miles to get to mine in Bath. We would certainly have been in our best shoes and socks. Any old thing wouldn't have done. The majority of people went to church. And I think eyebrows would have gone up a bit if you didn't. What did we come up with eventually, Seth?
I came up with helping an injured animal by taking care of it, feeding it and keeping it warm before setting it free.
Absolutely right, and particularly as the animal would be helpless, wouldn't it? So, before you go back into church, we want to say a little prayer, don't we? So, hands together, eyes closed. Oh, Jesus, help us always to be good Samaritans, and help us to look round and look for the needs of others. We ask this in thy name. Amen.
Amen.
Still weeping, she stooped to look inside, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been. One at the
Sunday school over, Seth has rejoined his family in church.
Hallelujah. Supposing him to be the gardener, she said, Sir, if you have taken him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go and remove him.
For a non-believer like Steph, the demands of 1950s respectability are proving too much. She's leaving the service.
If I'd been a 50s housewife, I would be seething with resentment and having to suppress it, and that would be awful. And it's not saying that I think religion is wrong or people are wrong to worship or whatever, it's up to them, but if I were being forced into doing something, I probably would have been one of those poor women that got locked up for hysteria.
It doesn't really seem fair, the fact that people have to go, because it's sort of, it's judging, people would heavily judge you and frown upon the fact that you didn't go, even though the things that they were teaching you during church were not to frown upon people no matter what.
Like that. Perfect.
Conforming to what's expected doesn't stop at the front door. While Steph and Daisy cook Sunday lunch, Rob and Seth get to relax with activities appropriate for a Sunday afternoon in 1951.
I am reading Prelude to Space by Arthur C. Clarke.
Sundays were sacred, and children were expected to stay inside. Some parks even tied up their swings.
Feels like I should be doing something active with my hands, which is, in this case, shuffling cards. This is my 1950s version of what I would be doing instead of texting people.
Very nice. That looks edible. It does.
Don't look so surprised.
It looks really nice.
It's meatloaf, which is onions, oats and egg and some beef.
And we've got the best china today and crystal glasses, we decided.
Here's to going through today and getting through the other end and it being an experience for us all, okay? And just be grateful that your parents have not forced you every Sunday to do that.
But what's really weird is that in the generation that we live in now, when you shut the front door, anything goes. You know, it's none of anybody's business. And actually, it's almost as though it was somebody else's business what you were doing behind closed doors. Like, you know, that you'd be judged if you did things differently. If Rob was seen at the kitchen window, for example, you know, absolutely atrocious, that you would be judged for it.
I thought the hardest thing that was going to be, that I was going to find it the hardest because I wouldn't have my technology. Now, it's not the technology I'm missing. I'm actually missing genuine freedom.
A normal Ashby Hawkins weekend is more relaxed. It is not so intense, and we all spread out our things evenly. If one person lays the table, the other person clears, regardless of gender. My mum and I have no downtime whatsoever, and we spend our entire time looking after other people.
Fulham hit back after early reverse.
It's 1952, and Daisy and Steph are still looking after the men of the house.
It's really weird seeing you going out. It's normally the other way round. Have a good day.
See you later.
Now he's the family breadwinner, Rob is off to work. Seth is off too, and for boys, that meant freedom. All over the UK, millions of children were members of organisations like the Scouts, Boys Brigade and Cadets. Your average boy would be a dab hand with sharp tools, self-defence, even amateur boat building.
If it's adventure you want, you can get it easily enough if you're only prepared to scout around for it.
What mattered was being outside and having fun.
Hello, Seth. Hello, kids. Welcome to your 1950s childhood. Do you know what this is?
Of course.
This is the great outdoors. This is basically where you spend all your time. Your parents just chuck you out in the morning and you don't come back till nightfall, if at all.
Wow.
And your first job is to pitch your tent.
Let's get to work then. Let's lay it out.
Are those instructions?
No, I think these are pegs.
Yeah, they're pegs.
Yeah.
Okay, let's lay it out.
I don't really know how to do it.
I've left them to get on with it. Most 50s boys could make camp with their eyes closed.
Oh, they all fell out.
It's not the best hammer.
Pull, Holly. Pull
that way, sorry.
Pull the stick back that way, yeah.
There you go.
Amazingly enough, I mean, if this were the 1950s, then our boys would definitely have one of these for chopping wood for the fire. They'd have all sorts of sharp instruments, which I think is fantastic that they had that sort of freedom. It's not as if they didn't have safety procedures. This is from a sort of boy's handbook from the 1950s. When one uses the axe, chop downwards and never in the direction of one's own body. So it's basically don't chop your own head off, which is useful advice. If the base becomes loosened from the head, desist your actions immediately. So it's boom, is, I guess, what you don't want there. Do you know, to be honest, sensible though that is, and amazing though it is to think that in the 1950s you'd send your kids to woodland with a very sharp implement and no supervision. And it is marvellous. It's just unthinkable now.
Here's a dandy and a beano.
I haven't given them the axe, but I have left them some matches.
There we go.
Finally.
Put it in.
We have fire.
No, we don't.
I can see it. I
can't see any flame. I can just see smoke.
While Seth learns how to survive in the great outdoors, Daisy is inside, training to be a housewife.
This is a really nice cup of tea. It's nice, actually. I do like
One must-have skill was sewing, and expert seamstress Rob's mother Jennifer has come along to help teach Daisy. The expenditure surveys show thousands of examples of women buying fabric and haberdashery for sewing projects, like this housewife from Manchester, who bought 2 yards of curtain material for 5 shillings. Social historian Polly Russell is joining the group, bringing with her one of the year's most fashionable designs.
Hello, good morning. Hello. I'm bringing you some fantastic fabric because we're going to be making some curtains and some cushions, because that is what women did in the 1950s. What do you think of this fabric, Jennifer?
I think it looks modern now. I'd actually make a pair of curtains in that.
How are all your sewing skills?
My mum taught me the basics of how to knit and how to sew.
What about you, Daisy? Where are you?
No, I can't sew. Actually, last night I sewed some buttons on with the wrong coloured thread and the wrong buttons and the wrong technique, so yeah.
So I think the pattern goes down the fabric.
Yeah.
I'm feeling the other way.
Well, you think it goes that way, do
you?
Yeah. Of course it can't, that's the side. I'm just trying to sort of semi-press a line in there. And the pin's really just a guide, Daisy.
This is really put me off, actually. Really put me off. I don't have the patience to do this.
But I think if you think about if you were in the 1950s as a young woman, there wouldn't be very much else to do.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
women's lives were very much centred around the home.
Mhm.
So, you know, you can't go to the pub, you can't go out betting, you probably aren't going to go to football. You know, your social life is quite domestic.
It's just very long and difficult and...
So it's not instant.
It's not instant. Yeah, I need something to be like there, done. It's not going to take that time.
Wow.
It's like the Olympic torch.
Apart from the fact that the Olympic torch actually got set alight.
There's a bit of...
Right, chaps, how are you getting on? What you've got here is a...
We got it.
We got a bucket of leaves.
You've got a bucket of leaves, haven't you? Do you think we should start again?
Yeah.
My 3 years as a Cub Scout in 1970s North London are finally paying off.
Right, well, we have our fire basically working now and hot, so let's cook. What have you got?
I've got some
I'm
spam.
hoping for a whole roast piglet or something.
Some spam and some baked beans.
You got spam and baked beans?
Yep. Oh, that's good. That looks good.
I don't know if that looks good or not.
It does look
good.
Oh, look at that spam fritter. That's bubbling nicely. Who's going to go first?
I'll do it.
Go on.
Oh, it's like salmon. Spam's actually not bad.
Does it taste better because you're outdoors and you're bonding with your friends and battling the elements?
I think it feels a bit more like an achievement
actually. That's probably why I like it a bit more, because we made the fire, we scavenged, we found the wood and the leaves.
I mean, today, in the school holidays, if you weren't here doing this, what would you be likely to be doing?
Gaming, playing computer games.
Really?
I think it'd be nice to kind of just do this more often. Sort of get away from a screen and just go out here and do this. Wave the scissors! Yeah!
It's nice to see these 21st century kind of kids who are into gaming responding to the 1950s outdoor lifestyle. I mean, one has to remember that the flip side of that was they were being trained to respond to authority, to be given orders, to follow rules, to put on uniforms, to join the army, to be men, to be grown-up members of society. It wasn't all fun and games. "5:15 sharp and Rob's home. But there's still work for the man of the house.
She's made the curtains. It would appear that I'm the one who has to put them up. I'm not sure it's going to be great, but I don't know. Yesterday the bell worked. I'm going the right way. Oh, no, I'm going the right way now. There we go. No, is it that way? I think that's the way.
What you need to do is rinse the plates first, because otherwise you end up with all the bits floating in the water.
Just soak everything. I think that's easy, yeah.
But if you rinse it first...
No.
I think men were constrained and women were constrained in the 50s. How they coped with that, I don't know.
My idea of leisure and pleasure isn't DIY.
I definitely am feeling trapped in the fact that some girls my age previously have actually thought that this is what their life's going to be for the rest of their life. It makes me really kind of go, wow. Wow.
Right now I'm actually in the tent. Really nice to be out here, actually. It's just been a lot of fun, just enjoying and just sort of chilling and hanging out.
I've absolutely no idea what the flowers are at all. Red, white and blue is what I know.
In 1953, Britain was in the midst of a massive house-building programme. 1.5 million homes were built, replacing those destroyed by bombs and slum clearance. As a result, many British families got their first ever garden, and gardening became one of the nation's favourite pastimes.
I mean, how hard can it be to plant plants? It can't be that difficult. You've got to make sure that the flower is above the surface of the earth and the roots are below the surface of the earth.
New garden centres made it easy for novice enthusiasts by selling pre-grown potted plants. Like those bought by this couple from Shropshire, who on the 8th of May 1953 spent 2 shillings on a dozen lobelia.
I'm going to go for a red bullseye, white on the outside, then blue on the outside of that. See how it works out. It may look dreadful, but at the end of the day, it'll be an explosion of colour, and that's what's important.
Rob's created a patriotic floral display to celebrate the biggest event of the year.
Once it's bedded in and it's blooming, it's going to look absolutely fabulous, I'm sure.
1953 saw the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II.
The grandest symbol of all is the crown of St. Edward. The Archbishop gently sets this splendid emblem on the Queen's head. And the trumpets sound.
The day was declared a national holiday. And like millions of other families, the Ashby Hawkins are celebrating with a party.
Cream, fat and vanilla together. Is butter fat?
Which means it's Daisy's job to make a cake.
This is a bit shelly, that's okay. It does look like catsup.
OK, ladies, welcome to the lounge of 1953.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I remember carpets like this.
The party's special guests are Barbara, Anne and Francis, local WI members who all set up home in the 50s.
The radio. Typical.
So does this kind of lounge look
Yes.
Familiar territory to you?
Yes.
No fitted carpet, just carpets,
Oh, yes.
covering as much of the room as possible. You know, interior design hadn't really taken off. Nothing was desperately coordinated, which is what this has the appearance of.
It's a mishmash, isn't it?
It is a mishmash.
It was things left over, wasn't it, really? People hadn't really got on top of things in the early days of 50s. Things were still very lean on the ground.
No wonder an estimated 17 million people across the country leapt at the chance to forget austerity and celebrate.
Dates and cinnamon, and then the icing is coconut and orange zest.
That looks lovely. Thank you.
I think the 50s has turned Daisy into a domestic goddess myself.
Crowds have waited for this moment as the golden coach appears in view for the first time.
Like 96% of the population, the Ashby Hawkins don't have a telly, so they're listening to the coronation on the radio.
And escorted by her cavalry, she drives through cheering crowds down the gaily decorated avenue of the Mall.
Flags everywhere, bunting everywhere, you know. And we were very patriotic. I think it was an event that lifted the general public. We'd had so much doom and gloom, and I think it was an excuse to party.
Well, happy coronation. Cheers. Here's to the Queen, huh? We are.
Yeah.
Cheers.
God bless her.
For the 1950s generation, standing up to sing the national anthem was almost instinctive. It was played in cinemas, theatres and on the radio and television every day.
And so, this day of days most memorable comes to an end. And with it begins a new era. Long may she reign.
I think I actually felt the joy of the occasion, just purely with flowers and bunting. The moment they stood up and sang was priceless. I mean, for me, that was brilliant.
I can't believe that Daisy actually successfully made a cake that people could eat without spitting it out. That's really good, and I'm really pleased for her. And yeah, it's been a really good day.
It's all going in your face.
So disgusting.
Sorry.
I can smell the sink and everything we washed up in it.
I literally scrubbed that sink yesterday, so it should be clean.
So far, Daisy's time has been dominated by domestic duties. But today she's got the chance to go out and get a taste of some respectable 50s fun.
I think you're done.
Ballroom dancing was a hugely popular leisure activity in 50s Britain, with over 200 million tickets sold every year. People flocked to dance halls across the country, all dancing to the same music and following the same steps.
Left foot forward for 1. Right foot to the side and slightly forward for 2. Close your left foot up to your right foot for 3. Now, can I see you doing that now, please?
Daisy and her friend Ella have come to the local village hall to be taught ballroom dancing by someone who learnt in the 1950s, Angela Rippon.
Hello! Hi! Daisy?
Yes, I know.
And Ella?
Ella, yes, nice
I
to
have
meet
to
you.
say, you both look lovely.
Thank you.
Well, I have to tell you, a 16-year-old in the 1950s, if you were a proper young lady at that time, you would not be able to go to a dance if you could not do proper grown-up dancing. The extraordinary thing about ballroom dancing when I was a teen is that you were doing what your parents did. Most of the time, I was dancing at events that I went to with my parents, so I got the advantage of being able to dance with my dad, who could really dance well. Now, all we're going to do is 3 steps. You're going to go forward, sideways, and then bring together. All right?
Okay, I got that.
Do it again. Forward, sideways, bring together. Back, side, together. You can waltz. Ready, and... go. 3, back, 2, 3, forward, 2, 3, back, 2, 3, back, 2, 3. Okay? In time with the music, that's it. Being able to dance formally and properly in the 50s was certainly very important. The majority of young women were thinking about growing up, getting married, being a housewife, doing that as a career, and having children. And being able to dance was all part of that. You had to learn how to, be a good wife and a mother and a good social companion for your husband. We're going to do the quick step, which is what it says. It's quicker.
Yeah.
As simple as that. Forward, forward, side. Straight lines, back with your left. 1, 2, sideways. But you can see how ballroom dancing is it's formal because there's a set pattern to the steps.
Yeah.
It's not like music of the 21st century, the 20th century, or even later in the 50s and the 60s where it was rock and roll and you could kind of freestyle and do really what you liked. But in ballroom dancing, there are set steps. And go. 1, 2, side step. 1, 2, side step. 1, 2, sideways. 1, 2, sideways. 1, 2, sideways. 1, 2, sideways. Go back. 1, 2.
Once you'd mastered the steps, you could go on to the real thing. Have fun dancing with boys, and even possibly meet your future husband.
We would go to a dance hall in Plymouth called the Majestic. And the girls would all sit around the outside, and the boys would come up to you and say, "Can I have this dance, please?" And you'd be sat down with your girlfriends, and you'd size him up, and if you thought, "Yeah, he's a bit fit, he's all right," you'd say, "Yes, thank you so much." And you'd get up, and you'd be very demure, and you'd go out, and you'd dance, and you'd get that physical contact. That's the great thing about ballroom dancing, of course, you get the physical contact of it. And if you didn't like the look of them, you'd say, "No, thanks."
I totally enjoyed dancing. Even though I can't do it very well, I still have a laugh and it's really nice, but it's still formal. They make, in the 50s, everything is formal. And, I have to go to a dance to meet a husband, to get married and to be like my mum. And it's quite annoying.
Yeah.
I get stressed when I can't do things perfectly.
It's Saturday afternoon and Rob's on his way to the pub. 1950s boozers were a different world. No women, no kids, but plenty of beer and fags. Before the link between tobacco and cancer was well known, cigarettes were cheap and smoking was a national pastime. The expenditure survey features countless examples of daily spending on tobacco. 80% of men smoked, and you could light up anywhere. At home, at work, even on the pitch. A respectable housewife like Steph would certainly not have gone to the pub to smoke and drink. Luckily, there's plenty at home to keep her occupied.
A woman's touch can weave a spell, the kind of hocus pocus that she does so well. With the magic of a broom, she can mesmerize a room. With the whisk here and a whisk there and a dustpan for the cinders. With the rub here and a rub there, she could polish up the winders.
I'm here in the house, and actually I'd quite like to be in the pub as well. Without the criticism of, "But have you done the washing?" Because I bet you there was a lot of that went on. Yes, it's all right, dear, you can go off and do whatever you want, as long as there's dinner on the table, the house is clean, my shirts are starched, all that sort of stuff. You absolutely have as much free time as you want. There isn't any. I was expecting it to be the communications tech that I would miss. I hadn't really thought about the domestic tech that I absolutely take for granted. I missed the washing machine, the dishwasher. I mean, you've got a mangle and you've got a washboard and you've got a rudimentary sink. It feels like I'm just waiting for the explosion of technology to happen that's going to really free me. By Jove, the tech is going to free me.
By the second half of the decade, Britain's economy was finally picking up. The average wage jumped from £7 a week in 1950 to just over £10. Almost everyone had a bit more money to spare for treats like Children's Cinema Club, a regular Saturday morning fixture across the country.
Today, the modern housewife uses aluminium foil, for that is the correct name.
The club screened anything from westerns to educational documentaries.
The films are quite boring for us compared to what we watched the 21st century.
But the good thing is, as usual, it's an adult-free zone.
My parents probably tell me to sit down and shut up. Now I can sort of turn on Harvey and just do that.
It wasn't just kids who were getting treats. The expenditure surveys reveal how women were too. Like this young woman from Hackney, who bought herself a little luxury for Valentine's Day. A powder puff for 1 shilling and threepence. Capitalising on this new market, Boots' cosmetics range exploded, and Polly's come to meet their archivist, Sophie Clapp.
In the 50s, we saw the range expand on a scale that had never happened in the past. We started to introduce things like this beautiful powder for after the bath.
I mean, this is just pure luxury. It's just a bit of being a film star in your home, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And what about the cost of these? What was the most expensive in the range?
So surprisingly, it was our lipsticks. That was seen as the luxury item.
Oh, really?
And it was beautifully decorated with these stars, again, that touch of glamour. And the idea really was that women could, pull it out of their handbag with a flourish because they were confident, because it looked so beautiful. So that was the real aspirational piece. And you definitely get a sense that this is what women want. They've had this period of not being able to treat themselves. So by the end of the decade, they're very comfortable on buying themselves a treat.
And it's sort of self-perpetuating, isn't it? That, the more you have, the more you want, the more that's available, and it just sort of goes on and on. The sort of the beginning of the rise of consumerism.
Complete explosion.
I've splashed out on a little treat for you, a new lipstick and the most popular shade in 1956, Copper Rose. Enjoy, from Polly.
Oh my word, that's wild.
This is the first ultra glam thing that's happened to me in the 50s, and I know it's only a lipstick, but I'm really chuffed. Thank you, Polly. It's a lovely present. I kind of feel a bit more, more modern.
Oh, the good life, full of fun, seems to be
No doubt. Yeah, exactly.
After 7 days in the 50s, the Ashby Hawkins are beginning to look like a picture book version of times gone by.
the good life.
The kitchen might be his usual domain, but Rob's starting to feel at home in the shed. He's spent all morning making a table.
The instructions are a bit vague because it looks like there should be a lip here. So I've given it a lip, and now I'm going to put the very last leg on. I've really enjoyed sanding as well. It's all smooth and lovely, very satisfying.
Well, he's been doing something in a shed for hours. Yet to see what it is, but I'm sure there'll be a grand reveal at some point. But I think his DIY's got better. Or should I say less worse?
Yeah, sturdy, solid, and level. And that was without a spirit level. I've never, ever made a table before. I think I'm really proud of it. I didn't think I could do it when I started. I'm really pleased with that.
My attractive modern table.
Wow, look at that.
I really made that.
That's really cool.
Huh?
Seriously, I'm really impressed that you put it together.
My dad's table, which he made, which I thought was pretty... It was okay. My dad's normally all cooking and stuff. It doesn't seem right that he suddenly transfers all the way over to DIY, and it's a bit weird seeing him in another form, sort of.
It's 1958! Yay!
By the end of the decade, a new generation was emerging, with a name all of their own.
This This is the age of the teenager. Youth 1958, what's it got to say for itself?
This is us, see? We're today. If you don't dig us, shoot away some square joint to the rest of the creeps. Well, why not stick around and get with it?
In 1958, Britain had 1 million more teens than at the start of the decade. Thanks to full employment and the new welfare state, they were healthier and wealthier than any generation before. Teenagers across Britain rejected conformity and embraced their own fashions, fads, and most of all, music.
Right, okay, that's a lot older than I expected it.
Right, so I guess...
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4
I think we have to tune it in.
5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, a rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, a rock. We're gonna rock.
You want to dance?
I'm not dancing.
Come on, darling,
No.
you have to.
I'm not
It's fun.
dancing.
And unlike ballroom dancing, it isn't up to Daisy's boyfriend TJ to take the lead.
No, we're not actually going to dance. Do we have to?
You have to, right?
Okay. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Right,
I don't know.
move
Wait,
this
so wait,
foot.
so do I
Just keep
do I
that
keep in
foot.
time with you?
Yeah, just keep the foot.
Right.
going.
Okay. Right.
Right.
Sorry.
You're not sorry though, are you?
Rock and roll signalled a sea change. The days of following in your parents' footsteps were over.
Boom. It's really, really nice. Like, the clothes have changed. I'm a lot more, like, relaxed. I had fun in the first time of this decade.
And change is afoot for Steph, too.
I got rid of her mangle and everything, and we're going to put this in there to make her life easier.
So far, Steph's life in the 50s has left her very little time for leisure, and the washing has been the most time-consuming chore of them all. But Rob's bought her a surprise present, a piece of technology that would change women's lives forever.
Just here. There we go. It's nice, isn't it?
Thanks to the relaxation of borrowing laws, which led to a surge in hire purchase, modern appliances were finally becoming affordable to ordinary families.
Mrs. Harrison, what have you bought on HP?
Oh, there's the mixer, the fridge, the washing machine, the dishwasher, and the polisher.
In 1958, sales of washing machines leapt by 48%, eclipsing even fridges in their popularity. And no wonder, when washing was one of the most time-consuming tasks of a woman's 75-hour week.
It's the new Fiat Electric Liberator. You can be miles away. And when you come back, your washing has been done for you.
Come on, have a look. Come on. Go through and have a look.
What is it?
It's for you to find out. It's to make your life easier.
Thanks. That's pretty impressive, actually. That's the lever. We put water. Well, I think it might need oiling. Look how filthy the water is. 1950s woman would have thought it was a miracle.
We're not there yet, but it's a symbol of hope. It's a beacon in the corner of the kitchen. We might actually be able to get out that way, and that men might actually come this way. I'm excited because I actually get to go out. Hopefully it's a start, a bit of liberation for me. So, you know, my nice washing machine. Maybe life is looking up for me as a 50s woman. God, I really hope so. I really do. And it's 1959! Woo! Last year of the decade. Well, we're celebrating the end of the 1950s, and I will be celebrating the end of the 1950s and looking forward to the 60s. So we're having a few friends round, and we've got some fabulous 1950s party food, which consists 90% of spam. I expect there's a technical term for this in 1950s housewifery, and it's probably persuading the blancmange out of the mould or something, isn't it? Right, I'm going in. Oh, I heard a plop. I think we're going to need a bigger plate.
Guinness? I'll let one Guinness boil up.
I'm joining the party to find out how the family got on in the 1950s.
Now, what's that?
What's that?
It's a festive ginger beer. We have deviled eggs, we have sardines, we have spam.
Corned beef.
And if you don't like spam, we've got spam with tomato.
Rob is quick to use the occasion to show off his newfound skills.
What do you think it looks like? What does it look like?
It looks functional and stylish.
What do you think it looks like?
I think it looks like an attractive modern table.
So how's it been? How's the 50s been for you?
I am glad it's over, because it's been really hard, because I've been in all the time.
And how's it gone with the DIY? How's it gone in the shed?
DIY started off poorly, but I became better as I went along.
And do you think you'll kick on and make more things?
No, I'm going to finish on. I'm finishing on top. I've peaked. That's it.
It has given me an appreciation of what it was like in the 50s, because we have lived it 24/7, and it's so different. It's so different from our lives now. As a 50s woman, leisure didn't really exist for me. It just didn't.
From the 50s was that it was very strict and conventional. In the evenings we would play cards and we would talk, and that was quite nice. But as a family, there wasn't a great deal of leisure time that we had.
This experience has made me really appreciate, my freedom as a person, because I can go out at any time. I don't have to stay at home and clean the kitchen. I don't have to do that.
I think I have had the best deal out of everyone. I'm the only one that sort of can do what I want to do rather than being put in their place by social expectations.
The Ashby Hawkins have survived a decade of austerity, hard graft and rigid convention. The 60s are fast approaching, with the promise of a bit more freedom.
I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts. There they are, all in a row. Big ones, little ones, some as big as your head.
It's clearly been very difficult for them. I mean, they're a very modern family, and even by modern standards. So to go back to that era of conformity, there to be so little freedom of expression. They're restricted in everything that they do. They have very little freedom of movement, apart from Seth. He's really happy. Seth seemed to think it was marvellous. And when we think of the 50s as having been a golden age, the people we're listening to are the people who are old now, who were Seth's age then. We're not hearing the voice of Rob and Steph, we're hearing the voice of Seth. Clearly, it was a great time to be 12. Next time, it's out with the old and in with the new.
Oh, yeah.
As the Ashby Hawkins swing into the 60s.
I'm free!
And that's next Tuesday at 8. Now to the jewel in India's crown, the Taj Mahal, which leaves one of our OAPs in tears. The Royal Marigold Hotel next. Then facing the judges and the mystery bag. Don't know what's in it? It's a mystery bag. Phone Shop Idol at 10.